They don't tell you this at the beginning. They don't mention it when the oil is still fresh on your forehead, when the hands are still laid and the crowd is still clapping. They don't say it when you first feel the spark in your chest, when purpose feels like a promise wrapped in light. No, they let you believe that being chosen is going to be beautiful, effortless, glorious from start to finish. They let you dream of stages, victories, breakthroughs, and favor falling like rain. But they don't tell you about the wait. They don't tell you about the nights. They don't tell you that being chosen often feels more like being crushed. Because the truth is, being chosen by God doesn't always feel like a blessing. Sometimes it feels like isolation. Sometimes it feels like everyone else is getting ahead while you're standing still. Sometimes it feels like fighting battles no one sees and carrying burdens no one understands. But that silence is sacred. That struggle is holy. And if you are living it, you're not crazy, you're not cursed, you're not alone. You're just chosen. And this message is for you. Because today we're going to talk about the part of the calling they never warned you about. They don't tell you that being chosen often means being set apart in ways that feel more like abandonment than elevation. From the outside, the idea of being selected by God, marked for greatness, or destined for a higher purpose sounds glorious. But the truth that rarely gets mentioned is that chosen children walk a lonely road. It starts early, while others seem to fit in effortlessly, laugh in groups, and walk together down familiar paths. The chosen find themselves constantly standing on the outside, not because they are unloved, but because they are different. There's something about them that doesn't blend, something in their spirit that quietly sets them apart. It's not pride, it's not arrogance, it's divine design. This isolation is not accidental, it's intentional. God often hides his vassals before he reveals them. Before David sat on a throne, he sat alone in fields with sheep. Before Joseph wore a robe of honor, he wore betrayal in the pit and chains in prison. These are not just stories, they are patterns. Chosen children are separated, not to be punished, but to be prepared. The loneliness is not rejection, it's refinement. Yet, in the silence of those seasons, it doesn't feel holy. It feels harsh. It feels like being forgotten, like everyone else is moving forward while you're stuck in the back room of destiny with no instructions, no map, just questions. The pain of isolation teaches the chosen one of the most critical lessons. How to be faithful when no one sees you. How to pray when there's no spotlight. How to remain committed to the calling when there's no crowd cheering you on. And that lesson is essential because if you cannot stand alone with God in the quiet, you'll collapse when the noise of the crowd comes later. This quiet season becomes the foundation of trust. God pulls you away not to punish, but to whisper secrets into your soul that can't be spoken in the noise of normality. Sometimes even family doesn't understand. Friends can't relate. You try to explain it, but how do you explain a feeling of divine separation? You carry a burden they can't see. You feel a fire for something that hasn't even happened yet, and still you wait. The chosen are not born to follow crowds. They are born to lead. But before leadership comes, God will make sure they can handle loneliness, because if you cannot survive the cave, you are not ready for the castle. So they don't tell you this. Being chosen often looks like being forgotten. It looks like sitting in the back while others go ahead. It feels like prayers that echo and dreams that delay. But if you look closely, you'll see a pattern. The ones who did the most for God were often the ones he hid the longest, not to shame them, but to shape them. Isolation is not a curse for the chosen. It is the cocoon, and in that cocoon, wings are born. They don't tell you how heavy the calling really is. Being chosen is not just about favor. It's about carrying something far bigger than yourself. The stories we love to celebrate, the deliverance of nations, the miracles, the leadership, the breakthroughs, are all outcomes. What we rarely talk about is the weight that had to be carried behind the scenes. When God places a calling on a life, He doesn't give it with ease or comfort, as He gives it with fire. The chosen don't get to walk light. They walk burdened with vision, responsibility, and spiritual resistance that others don't even see. But this weight doesn't come all at once. It builds slowly. First, there's a stirring in the heart, a sense that life has purpose beyond the surface. Then there's the call to leave something behind, friends, comforts, habits, places. And it hurts. The calling begins to separate you from everything familiar. You start to see life differently. You can't engage in the same conversations or enjoy the same things because your spirit is unsettled. The calling starts to press on you before it ever lifts you up. It presses the selfishness out. It presses the ego out. It presses the convenience out. And none of that feels glorious. It feels crushing. Moses didn't walk into Pharaoh's palace with confidence from the start. He was broken in the wilderness for 40 years. That's the weight. Esther didn't just step into royalty, she stepped into the terrifying possibility of death for the sake of her people. That's the weight. Jesus, before he began his ministry, was led into the wilderness to be tempted, hungry, and alone. That's the weight. There is no shortcut around it. The calling is costly, and chosen children must learn to carry it with humility. What they don't tell you is that this burden doesn't leave. It may shift, it may evolve, but it remains. Because the calling is not something you do, it's something you are. You carry the vision when you're tired. You pray when you don't feel spiritual. You lead when you'd rather run. You serve when no one notices. You bleed privately so others can be healed publicly. That's the weight. And sometimes it feels unfair. Why me? Why can't I just be normal? Why do I have to feel everything so deeply, care so much, fight so hard? But here's the truth. God doesn't put weight on something that won't carry glory later. If the calling is heavy, it's because what's coming is holy. Chosen children are not given easy assignments. They are given eternal ones. Their steps are ordered, but their path is not painless. The burden is real. The tears are real. But so is the reward. Carry the weight. Heaven is watching. They don't tell you that being favored by God doesn't mean you're exempt from pain. In fact, sometimes it feels like the favor invites the pain. We've been taught to associate God's favor with things like promotion, blessings, opportunities, and open doors. And yes, those things come. But what we don't often hear is that favor is a responsibility, not a shield. It doesn't spare you from suffering. It prepares you to endure it differently. Chosen children, those marked by God's hand, often find themselves walking through fire with nothing but a word to hold on to. No explanation, no comfort, no quick escape. Just the quiet assurance that they are still chosen, even while it hurts. Look at the stories we admire. Mary was favored to carry the Son of God, yet she endured whispers, shame, and the pain of watching her child suffer. Joseph was favored with dreams and a destiny to lead, but he was sold into slavery, thrown into prison, and forgotten before the dream ever came to pass. These were not signs of rejection, they were signs of refinement. The pain wasn't a detour. It was part of the process, because favor will take you places that character must be strong enough to keep you. And character isn't built in comfort, it's built in pain. The chosen often ask in secret, if I'm favored, why does it hurt so much? It hurts because you're being stretched. It hurts because you're carrying something divine in a human body. It hurts because spiritual growth feels like death to the flesh. And in that pain, God isn't punishing you. He's purifying you. He's teaching you how to trust when it doesn't make sense, how to worship when you don't feel Him, how to lead when your heart is bleeding. That kind of strength doesn't come from easy seasons. It's born in the storm, in the silence, in the surrender. Favor is not always visible. It doesn't always look like success. Sometimes it looks like struggle. But in heaven's eyes, you are being forged, not forgotten. The enemy fights hardest not against the weakest, but against the favored. The attacks don't mean you're off track. They often mean you're right on time. There's a kind of pain that only the chosen carry, not because they are cursed, but because they are called. And that pain, when surrendered to God, becomes the very tool He uses to shape nations, shift atmospheres, and bring healing to others. So no, favor doesn't mean a life free from hardship. It means that in the hardship, God is with you. It means He trusts you with trials because He's placed glory on the other side. The pain doesn't disqualify the chosen, it refines them. It deepens their compassion, sharpens their discernment, and anchors their faith. Don't let the pain make you forget the favor. The two walk together always. They don't tell you that the process of becoming who you're called to be is rarely publicized. We live in a world that celebrates the highlight reel, the breakthrough moment, the finished product. We see the crown, the influence, the platform, but what we don't see is the crushing, the behind-the-scenes silence, the secret sacrifices, the battles fought in bedrooms, in wildernesses, in private places where applause cannot reach. Chosen children are not made on stages. They are made in shadows, and that part of the journey is almost never told. People love the story once it's safe, once it's victorious, once it's palatable, but the process, the confusing, painful, lonely stretch between the promise and the fulfillment is usually skipped over. Why? Because it's not glamorous. It's not easy to explain. How do you describe nights you cried yourself to sleep without knowing why? How do you share the seasons where God seemed quiet and your soul screamed for answers? This part of the journey doesn't fit into neat testimonies. It's messy, it's stretching, it's sacred. God always works in the dark before He reveals in the light. Before a seed breaks the surface, it must die beneath the soil. Before oil flowed from David's head, he fought lions and bears in solitude. Before Paul preached the gospel to nations, he spent years in obscurity, being broken, reformed, and tested. This is how God works. He forms in silence. He develops in stillness. And the deeper the call, the longer the prep, because what is not processed will never last under pressure. In this hidden season, God deals with the unseen parts of your life. Your motives, your pride, your wounds. He doesn't rush. He isn't after your performance, He's after your purity. And while the world may not be watching, heaven is deeply involved. The process hurts, not because God is distant, but because He is deliberate. He prunes, He purifies, He shapes. And most of that happens in places no one claps for. This is why so many give up. Because the process feels like punishment when you don't understand its purpose. It feels like abandonment when you expected arrival. But for the chosen, the process is the place where identity is cemented, where intimacy with God is built, where the foundation is laid deep enough to carry the weight of future influence. Without this, the calling would collapse under pressure. That's why God hides His best, not to delay them, but to develop them. So no, they won't tell you about the nights you questioned your sanity. They won't mention the seasons when everyone else seemed to move forward while you stood still. But if you're in the process, don't despise it, don't rush it, don't envy those whose paths seem easier. God is not slow, He is thorough. And when He finally reveals what He has been shaping in secret, it will carry a weight of glory that could never have come any other way. They don't tell you that chosen children often have to fight battles meant for nations. Their struggle is rarely just about them. It's about breaking something that's been standing for generations. It's about shifting things in the spirit that others were too weary, too wounded, or too unaware to confront. The chosen are assigned to disrupt cycles of fear, addiction, shame, silence, compromise. They are not just walking through personal pain. They are carrying the burden of deliverance for families, communities, and sometimes entire bloodlines. When you are chosen, you are born into warfare you didn't start. You step into rooms where the tension is spiritual before it is circumstantial. You feel pressure others can't explain. You sense battles rising long before they show up in the natural. You walk into environments and feel the resistance before a word is even spoken. Why? Because you are not just another person. You are a breaker. And breakers always meet resistance first. This is why your life has never felt ordinary. This is why you've battled anxiety, insecurity, rejection, even from childhood. Because hell recognized you before you recognize yourself. The enemy doesn't fight what he doesn't fear. And when you are called to set captives free, you will be targeted to remain in bondage yourself. But what no one tells you is that the weight of your warfare is a signal of your assignment. You are not being punished, you are being positioned. Think about Moses. Before he delivered Israel, he first had to survive Pharaoh's wrath as an infant, then endure exile and rejection. Think of Gideon, hiding in fear, called to defeat a nation's oppressors with nothing but obedience. Or Jesus, the spotless Son of God, who bore not only physical suffering, but the weight of all sin, every generation's shame, sorrow, and curse. These were not personal battles. These were generational wars, and those called to fight them could not afford to live soft, distracted, or unaware. Chosen children often feel like they're drowning in battles others don't even notice. But here's the secret. They're not drowning. They're digging wells, deep wells, wells that future generations will drink from. Your healing isn't just for you, it's for your children. Your breakthrough isn't just yours, it opens the door for others. Your yes to God becomes the turning point for people you may never meet. That's the scope of your calling. That's why the fire has been hotter. That's why the tests have been longer. Because what you're birthing is bigger than you. So don't misread the fight. Don't let the weight confuse you. Chosen children are called to confront what others have ignored, to break what others have endured, to stand where others have fallen. You may be walking through a battlefield, but you're not walking alone. God's hand is upon you. And every time you choose obedience over comfort, every time you choose faith over fear, you are doing what warriors do, fighting not just for today, but for a future that only the chosen are trusted to build. They don't tell you that chosen children are tested relentlessly, not once, not twice, but again and again, in ways that seem unfair, unending, and often unnecessary. From the outside, people may admire their strength, their grace, their calling, but they don't see the fire behind it. They don't see the crushing. They don't see the wrestling. The chosen are not simply anointed and sent. They are broken, refined, tested, and trusted over and over until what remains is not just giftedness, but godliness. When God marks someone, He does not skip the furnace. He uses it. He walks them through seasons that press them to the edge of quitting, moments that silence their confidence, and trials that expose every weakness still hiding inside. And just when you think you've passed the test, another one comes, this time deeper, more personal, more confusing. It's not because God is cruel, it's because the chosen cannot be shallow. They must be deeply rooted in trust, in character, in obedience. And that only comes through testing. Tests for the chosen don't always look like open challenges. Sometimes they're disguised as delays. Sometimes they show up as silence. Other times they look like betrayal by those you loved most, or the pain of waiting for a promise while others around you flourish. You feel invisible while carrying something powerful. You wonder if you misheard God. You wonder if you're enough. And yet, every test is doing something sacred. It's revealing what still needs to die and what is strong enough to rise. Look at Abraham, tested with the very promise he waited years to receive. Look at Job, stripped of everything yet found faithful. Look at Jesus in Gethsemane, sweating drops of blood, tested in obedience even unto death. These were not random moments. These were holy examinations, proof that their hearts belonged fully to God. And chosen children are no exception. The deeper the call, the more thorough the testing. Not to destroy, but to purify. Not to weaken, but to prepare. The truth is, the chosen are trusted with tests others may never face, because God plans to do through them what He cannot do through others. And with that trust comes responsibility. Your reactions matter. Your posture in the trial matters. Will you still worship when He doesn't answer? Will you still serve when no one sees? Will you still believe when nothing makes sense? These are the questions that define the chosen, not their talents, not their visibility, but their endurance in secret testing grounds. They don't tell you this. Your greatest victories will often come after your hardest tests, not because you fought perfectly, but because you refused to quit. Every time you stay faithful in the fire, you are being refined into someone who can carry more glory, more weight, more influence, more authority. The chosen are not exempt from testing. They are called to it. And when the test is over and the smoke clears, they don't just come out stronger, they come out trusted. And that is something no one can take from them. So here it is, the part they don't tell you about chosen children, the truth behind the calling, behind the favor, behind the anointing. It's not just about glory, it's about grinding through silence, walking through fire, and carrying a weight the world may never see or understand. Chosen children are not born for comfort, but for impact. They are not shaped on stages, but in silence. Their process is long, their path is narrow, and their battles are heavy. But they are not alone. Every step has been ordered. Every test has purpose. Every tear is counted. If you've ever felt overlooked, misunderstood, or pressed beyond what feels fair, take heart. It's not because you're forgotten, it's because you're chosen. And what God is doing in you is not small, it's deep, it's holy, and it will last. So keep walking, keep trusting, keep becoming. There is a crown waiting on the other side of this cross, and not just for you, for everyone your obedience will touch. Thank you for walking through this truth today. If you heard something in this message that echoed inside your spirit, know that it was for you, not by accident, but by divine appointment. You are not weak, you are being made strong. You are not behind, you are being built. You are not lost, you are being led. Good luck on your journey, chosen one. Keep the fire alive. Heaven is watching, and history is waiting. Thank you, and may grace carry you through every step.